Good evening. Thank you, Ada. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Derek Brown. I'm come from Arizona. I'm Diné. My clans is Sanjikine Ishne, Tachini Basishin, Sitnajini Shache, Kiani Shanela. So like Ada said, I'm not a poet. I kind of express myself through video. I usually tell people like I'm a digital storyteller. I like to tell stories through video. And so that's kind of like my passion and the thing I like to do. With that being said, I had this one. My the collective members always tease me like, "Hey, Derek, when you gonna write? When you gonna put out a poem? And so I'm like, I don't know. I sat down one day and just out of the air, I came with this poem. And I was it kind of started like, I'm a moth, and that's kind of where it ends. So they always ask me like, hey, did you ever finish your moth poem? I'm like, nah, man. It's like, just forget it. I didn't know what I was thinking that day, but maybe one of these days, with these workshops, I help out with the youth. It might inspire me to write, and kind of be creative in that way. So, um, so back in 2008, I was in my digital documentary class at the University of Colorado, and I needed a documentary project to do. And so I was running through all these ideas, of which I do my documentary on. And I ran into a pretty good friend of mine, Darius Smith, and he told me about this event that's going to be going on in like 2 weeks. And so I kind of, learned a bit more about, what this event was going to be about. And so I needed to get in contact with another person, was Bill Tobble, because he was coordinating this event. And so when this event was happening, I really didn't know what the story was going to be about, and I didn't know anything about, what I was going to shoot. So I kind of did some research, I kind of like figured out like, what it was going to be about. But in 1864, a big old tragedy happened in the state of Colorado. It's known as the Sand Creek Massacre. It happened in 1864 by Colonel John Shivington. He left Denver and went down to a peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho village out in Eads, Colorado. And so it's an event that should not be forgotten. It's who, as Native Americans, it's all these sad tales and stories and tragedies that happen to us. And we've survived. We survived. So this event it's called the Sand Creek Massacre Spiritual Healing Run and Walk, and what inspired it was LaForce Lone Bear. His idea was to have this run that starts in East Colorado, where the massacre site took place, and run all the way to the city of Denver, to the Capitol steps. And basically what happened was when this massacre took place, the volunteers, and the soldiers, they paraded, body parts through the streets of Denver, and so it's kind of like a remembrance and reconciliation of that tragedy, that took place here in the state of Colorado. So it's an event that happens during the Thanksgiving holidays, and so every year is an event that takes place, the Sand Creek Massacre Spiritual Healing Run and Walk. And so I had a partner. She needed some project to do, and I took on this project, and I was like, all right, cool. So we'll go ahead and work together. Her name is Mattia Wellnetz. She kind of took part of the storytelling, the writing, the script, and did some editing, and I basically went out and kind of shot, with the director of photography, got out most of the footage. So it's an event that kind of takes place, and it came out to a 5-minute, it's a 5-minute documentary. It was just a small documentary, but it kind of explains what the Sand Creek Massacre Spiritual Healing Run and Walk is about, So I like to share that story with you, So whenever you're ready, we can roll the document.
On November 29th, 1864, Colonel John Shivington and the 3rd Colorado Volunteers attacked a peaceful Indian village of Cheyenne and Arapaho, who thought they were under the protection of the U.S. government. The Sand Creek Massacre Spiritual Healing Run and Walk takes place yearly to help make people aware of this senseless tragedy so it will not be forgotten. Sand Creek is a place history has tried to forget. The site of where an estimated 160 Cheyenne and Arapaho men, women, children, and elders were brutally massacred. Gold is what brought white settlers to the land of the Cheyenne and Arapaho. The hunger for land that potentially held the precious metal in its belly led to broken treaties and the violation of land and human rights. This event is unfortunately one of many in the culture clash and resulting violence that punctuated the Plains Indian Wars.
The stories and in the history of Sand Creek Massacre has been pushed aside. Many of you don't learn it in your schools. The schools that I went to didn't teach it.
To cultivate awareness in the youth and keep the memory of Sand Creek alive, the Sand Creek Massacre Spiritual Healing Run and Walk was created by LaForce Lee Lone Bear.
LaForce Lee Lone Bear.
Now in its 10th year, it is a way to move forward, reconcile, and heal.
I was the one that started the healing run in memory of our ancestors that were massacred at the site.
The Sand Creek Massacre Spiritual Healing Run and Walk is a prayer. The Sand Creek Massacre Spiritual Healing Run and Walk is not a race. The Sand Creek Massacre Spiritual Healing Run and Walk is a commemoration for the victims and survivors of the massacre and for the healing of ancestral homelands.
We talk about the power of place in the National Park Service. I have never stood anywhere where I have felt more humbled and in some sense not alone. We all have a connection to the lessons of Sand Creek.
And so, in tracing those lessons back, runners are transported to the site, some driving from as far as Oklahoma so they can return to where the massacre took place. Taking turns running with the ceremonial Eagle staff, primarily Cheyenne and Arapaho youth, ran nearly 18 miles the first day from Eads, Colorado. And from Lyman, they continue their run on the following day. On the eve of the runners' return to Denver, a candlelight vigil is held outside the Denver Art Museum, where the contemporary wheel sculpture stands, created by Cheyenne Arapaho artist Edgar Heap of Birds. We are always returning back home again. This phrase, a part of the sculpture, sums up the history of Sand Creek. 2008 marking the return of the repatriated ancestral remains of those massacred to the Sand Creek Historical Site.
And I think that's one thing to continue to honor and to try to go ahead to work again with the National Park Service to even have more of that and to protect that site even more.
On the third day of the Sand Creek Massacre Spiritual Healing Run, an honoring ceremony for Captain Silas Soule and Lieutenant Joseph A. Kramer took place at Riverside Cemetery, where the graves of the two men reside. Both men disobeyed orders to attack the Cheyenne Arapaho camp against the orders of the infamous Colonel Shivington.
Silas Soule lost his life, was assassinated in the streets of Denver for writing the letter that he wrote and giving the testimony that he gave. And that's why we honor him here today.
From the cemetery, the The run continues on, stopping at 15th and Arapahoe, where there are future plans to erect a sculpture in Silas Soule's honor. The Sand Creek Massacre Spiritual Healing Run finally concludes at the Capitol building, where runners and supporters alike gather on the Capitol steps, so that not only those directly descended from Sand Creek can heal, but that anyone seeking healing can participate in the event. In spite of the past that caused great loss and created a wound, they now travel hundreds of miles to heal. They stand on the Capitol steps in the 21st century, keeping the past alive, singing the same song that White Antelope sang the day he was shot down, so that the lesson of culture clash and violence can be learned from and not forgotten.
If you want to see the video, the Sand Creek Massacre Spiritual Healing Run and Walk is actually in the back of the book. So, yeah. Thank you for watching. You know, everyone back home. You know, I'm glad you're enjoying the show. You know.